It's only fair to the people who came on time.
Yes, that's
So,
true.
Gosha, you can go ahead and start the recording if you'd like. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today at the Writers Circle. The Writers Circle has been part of Centennial College for several years, and there's nothing we enjoy more than promoting Centennial College's authors and their work. So with that being said, we're going to get started right away, and I'd like to take the pleasure to introduce Marc Yamaguchi, who has published a book called Arai Guma. I hope I said that properly. I practiced it, so I hope I got it right, Marc. So at this stage, I'm excited to learn about Marc's journey and welcome Marc to share his story with us all. And we'll have some questions afterward once we finish hearing Marc's story. Thank you very much. And Marc, you're free to go ahead.
Hey, thank you very much, Shirley and Soumya, agreeing to host today's session. Gosha, who's been wonderful and letting me know when there's like opportunities to come back and meet everyone in the writer circle. And welcome to those people that are maybe joining the writing circle for the first time. It's this great space for people with side hustles to make something of their creations. And I'm kind of living proof of moving something from just an idea to like something tangible. And I think you may have noticed that there is a book available. It's on the shelves of the library, and it's like another like win in that column, which I consider just amazing, because this college community has provided these little boosts here and there. And I'm here to tell you about that little bit of a journey that I took, and that really had begun probably 4 years ago. The artwork that's in front of you is the cover. It is the first chapter of my story, which is about these raccoons from the countryside that are rent-evicted and find their way to the city, and then struggle in the city because of this brand new technology. That green bin that's up at the top left corner of the screen, it's been designed to keep the raccoons out. Right. And so let's see if I can move this forward a little bit. I don't want to start that. I just want to give you a sense of what it meant to have not just the first chapter, but the second chapter published through Centennial College publications, namely Writers Unblocked and then Cells Dialogues. And it's been quite the ride. And so what I have to do here is share my screen and give you a taste, I think, of the e-publication. And so what's resulted is really 2 publications, in the sense I have something for sale, but I also have some material up there for free if anyone would like to sample. And maybe, just maybe, after you listen to the chapter 3 that I am going to share with you today, you'll be more inclined, let's say, to maybe purchase this for a young adult, as initially this was designed to appeal to that maybe 18 to 25-year-old demographic. And on with the show. This is it. Chapter 3, Land of Gray Trees. Before Rachel's father went home to Rose, he was compelled to check the hawk's ominous prediction that the yellow caterpillars had metamorphosed into agents of death. As he came within 100 yards of the site, Rachel's father could not speak or move as he witnessed the loss of paradise, butchery of everything he had known, and on a scale unimaginable. The diesel exhaust singed the inside of Rachel's father's nose, and the rising sawdust from tattered trees blocked out the light from above, diminishing the canopy and creating an apocalyptic panic. There were horrific sounds of terror, altogether out of tune, which created a confusing image in Rachel's father's mind until he saw what was causing the earth to pulsate beneath his paws. Once the chaos of fleeing animals and insects had died down, Rachel's father furtively made his way to the flank of ravaged and upturned earth, strange with its exposed roots. Bewildered by this upside-down world that no longer resembled his home, he could not make sense of the perfectly symmetrical and parallel tracks that had cleared the forest cover, leaving utter destruction in its wake. The remaining flora was shaking rhythmically as Rachel's father carefully peeked at the carnage. He almost drew attention to himself when he mistakenly called out hawk at the sight of a large bird swooping in. But this turkey vulture never saw Rachel's father because he was headed straight for a bloody jackpot that his carrion bird gang had hit on. Among the dead, Rachel's father was horrified to see some coyotes who had been shot and subsequently driven into the ground by the yellow caterpillars. Bulldozers and excavators that did not discriminate in their war on the forest, nor its very rattled inhabitants. Running back 3 farmers' fields to their tree burrow, Rachel's father burst open the makeshift door and mentioned for the first and last time the sight of yellow caterpillars. Rose picked up on something otherworldly from the smell of her husband's paws, but he was too frantic to stop and spell out what he had witnessed. She thought she heard him muttering the words yellow caterpillars, but Rose couldn't understand why something so innocuous as caterpillars had sent her mate into such a tizzy in their bucolic homestead. Rose lunged and bit down hard on the tail of Rachel's father, who shrieked in pain, but she could not think of any other way to stop him from pacing wildly, disturbing the soft nesting materials. Rachel's father made such a mess of Rose's carefully planned nursing area, all the while muttering caterpillar this, caterpillar that. With her teeth still clenched tight around his tail, Rose screeched, enough, which echoed throughout their hollow tree. Rose let go, and the couple sat motionless, with only the sound of Rachel's father's blood dripping from his tail onto the leaf cover. Although her mate had stopped pacing, Rose had never seen him worked up to such a degree. Her mate even shed tears as he explained what he had experienced, and he feared they would be buried alongside the coyotes that used to keep them up at night. Rose thought his chat with red-tailed hawk was peculiar indeed. She was inclined to dismiss both the bird's predictions and her mate's report of ecological catastrophe. From the first mention of Rachel's father's encounter with red-tailed hawk, she'd scoffed at the validity of a predator imparting valuable information to a tree-hugging, hand-washing bear. Since when did hawks and raccoons agree on anything, much less behave civilly towards one another? No raccoon had ever returned to speak of the land of tall gray trees, so a trek there seemed like an elaborate trap set by predators to lure their prey out into the open. Besides, it was common knowledge that hawks' heads were full of air. Rose didn't want to believe her mate's story about the yellow caterpillars, but would later concede her husband had been right to uproot the family and give birth to Rachel and her brothers in the city. The story of how Rose's favorite was born a city girl would begin with Rose making light of her husband's madness due to foraging for mushrooms. Rose didn't want to believe the gift of life came from a hawk's mercy. That haughty bird, harbinger of traumatic events, it came to represent disaster in Rose's mind. So Rose liked to blame it for her and her husband's ensuing irreconcilable differences. Projecting guilt on the raptor was a way to cope with her misery over the rapidly changing landscape and an environment fast becoming inhospitable to the original inhabitants. Being angry at a bird was less painful than experiencing the anguish caused by the loss of her home and beloved companion. Rose could usually repress memories of the day everything changed, but sometimes they came back and she couldn't stop remembering every word Rachel's father said. "We must pack up and head for the city at once." Rachel's father was doing calculations out loud about when Rose would give birth, but Rose struggled to understand what he was proposing. 2 months? No, 1 month, might be 2 weeks, that's it. We've got to. Rose interrupted his frantic stuttering and looked him in the eyes. "What's gotten into you? You're not making any sense. I'm the one who should be losing it, not you. I'm the pregnant one here." Rural raccoons considered the city a threatening place of mythical proportions, and Rose believed that those who broke with the countryside chased a dream that would result in tragedy. Rose was really annoyed he was going on this way about the city. Was this a bad joke? A hawk cut me pretty bad on my back, but instead of trying to take my life, he stopped and said, He felt sorry for our kind. Rachel's father was regaining his composure as he spoke at length. The hawk wouldn't let me leave his kill zone without first warning me that these yellow caterpillars would be the end of us if we stayed to watch their approach. Rose was beginning to connect the dots, something about caterpillars being confused with great misfortune and extinction in her bird-brained husband. Was he out of his furry mind? In the first place, it was ludicrous to even consider he was talking with a hawk. If anything, he must have meant some know-it-all. Maybe if he got more oxygen, he would come to his senses. The yellow caterpillars have flushed out the hawk's prey in unbelievable numbers, which suits him fine. But he wanted me to know. We'd only survive if we moved to a different kind of forest, a land that has tall, gray, hardened trees. He wants our kind to survive, only because he respects the food chain. At this, Rachel's father let out a giant sigh and winced as he sat down on his hindquarters. The wound on his back from the hawk was still fresh, and as he curled up his tail, the matted fur pulled at the gash he got from Rose. Rose took advantage of the pause in her mate's flood of words. Let's say you had a word or two with this known silent killer. What makes you think a pregnant raccoon would leave the comfort of her home, travel with nothing but the babies in her womb, traverse the kill zones of her enemies in order to reach the promised land that our friend, the hawk, calls the city? When Rose made a point, she unashamedly began preaching with fervor, so nobody could get in a word edgewise. This night was different, however, and Rachel's father wouldn't give in until she agreed to come with him to see the desolation of the yellow caterpillars. When Rachel, Ricky, and Ray heard stories about their parents' past, it wasn't clear what made their parents sadder, the yellow caterpillars' desecration of the countryside, or that they had personally been forced from their home by the yellow caterpillars. On an extremely rare occasion, Rachel saw her father win an argument, like when Rose backed down on Rachel's punishment for failing to hide from the hawk that almost snatched her away in its talons. In fact, Rachel could only remember one other instance when her father exasperated her mother to the point that Rose gave in because she didn't have the patience to deal with his stubbornness. This was his decision to join a growing legion of city raccoons who had banded together to solve the green wheelie problem. After living several months in the city, Rose began to get on Rachel's father's case concerning their dwindling stores of food. Rachel's father reminded Rose that their chances of surviving in the city were still significantly better than returning to the countryside to negotiate with the yellow caterpillars. But Rachel's father could never have predicted the green wheelie conundrum that was indiscriminately starving populations of city raccoons. Not long before the arrival of the rural family of raccoons, some factions of urban raccoons decided to stop fighting over who ruled which neighborhood, and they teamed up to solve this existential crisis created by the Walkies. The Walkies never fought fair. They stood upright, which gave them the upper hand. And the use of the Walkies' hands bestowed an advantage over other Earthlings. In truth, Rachel's father had been struggling to adapt to the new conditions of city life during their first year. As luck would have it, Rachel's father was recruited to help fatten the ranks of a raccoon gang in need of his girth. A large-sized raccoon projected an image of prosperity and wealth, and the gang's leader, Severn, equated wealth with power. Severn had great ambitions, but was of modest proportions, so he would need enforcers on his quest to acquire resources and establish a prosperous economy that would secure his coronation. For Severn's growing pack of raccoons, the perception of strength was extremely important. Hunger could be either a threat to his new order or a tool to manipulate the desperation of his followers. Severn turned them into troops to beat the Walkies at their game of starving the raccoons. He was determined to outsmart the Walkies' green wheelie anti-theft technology. Severn judged the Walkies as contemptuous creatures for their senselessly wasteful ways. Evidently, one animal's junk was another's treasure. Ambition is born from envy. The Walkies' largesse made Severn as green with envy as the newly impregnable green bins. If it had served Severn's purposes, he would have commanded Rachel's father and his coterie of enforcers to scratch out the eyes of the Walkies. bipedal miscreants who routinely invaded his territory, robbed his kin of the refuse that should have fortified his expanding army.
That was
Tune in next
fabulous.
time for chapter 4.
Well done, Mark. That was excellent. I love your expressions when you describe the characters and the words they were saying. Wonderful.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. And I hope that people suspended their disbelief for that. How am I doing for time here? I hope that.
No, you're good. You can go ahead. No, you can go ahead.
Okay. So here's a little background on me and where I come from and why this environmental bent to my story, in case you didn't pick up on the hints. I've been teaching in the English department for a number of years, and Arai Guma represents my first publication besides my dissertation. And so I've taken great pride in being able to produce something that I think has some universal appeal and doesn't come across as too preachy. Because if there's one thing I learned from that expensive education, it's that environmentalists struggle to create narratives that don't shame people and blame people and make them retreat in the opposite direction or keep on doing what they're doing. So you could say I have a little bit of a hidden agenda in this book, but like good satire, we try to present things that mirror what we see or understand that's happening around us. And so you're hopefully will enjoy the remainder of Arai Guma. You can go and get a couple other chapters for free through the websites. And I'm sure Gosha or someone on the writing circle can post the Writers Unblocked link, or perhaps the link to Cell's dialogues. I know Marcel Kundari is here today. Thank you, Marcel. We really worked hard to get it to that point where I was unashamed or engaging in shameless self-promotion. You choose. But the time with which it got to that point where I'm ready to release this and have some eyeballs on it. Well, that was probably a 4-year period, and I was asked to share with the writing circle roughly what the process was to get it from word or idea to printed word. And so you could say the narrative arc to this story emerged in 2020. It was lockdown time, and a lot of people were twiddling their thumbs. It was a tough period. And so in order to stay positive or to distract ourselves with something constructive, Arai Guma emerged. There had been something of, let's say, fiction that I was creating prior to the pandemic, but this was concentrated time with which I could develop basically a log line or even an executive summary to what I wanted to do. And it's funny, I envision things cinematically. And you may share that same impression after you've read through Arai Guma, because it's really like a picture book. It's not quite a graphic novel, but I see that as the next step for me. The person that I sat down with first to examine whether or not this has legs was an independent movie producer. And he didn't encourage me to develop a screenplay, although I did start one. It's just chapter 1. He had said, it's probably best to come up with a manuscript and let's see what you've got after you've done that. So I took a year to basically pound out a rough draft. And that was good enough to call a manuscript, let's say. I was confident I could communicate what I needed in terms of visuals because, I had hoped to find an illustrator who could do storyboards for me. I'd still not given up on this idea that I was going to turn this into an animated feature. And so I connected with a fellow in the digital gaming industry who had to bow out after he realized, I had certain criteria and I needed to do this as a summer project. Being a full-time English professor, it doesn't leave me a lot of time to really devote to a side hustle sufficiently. And he then introduced me to a colleague of is a person who didn't have a young family. And I appreciated where he was coming from because I'm raising a young family too. So lots of competing priorities. And he just felt this kid was talented and understood maybe the kind of urban city edgy feel that I was looking for in an illustrator. So after my first illustrator helped me craft the logo, the free Frankenstein font for Arai Guma that you see on the screen at the bottom right corner, he handed it over to this fellow named Hung Hong. And Hung hails from Vietnam, and he's recently immigrated to Canada, and so he brings with him like this wonderful history of we would call it animation, a background in not just for digital gaming, which the industry he's in, but comic books and Japanese comic books, manga style comic books, which are those black and white, it's pulpy material. It's a small book. The dimensions of this that I produced are deliberate and on purpose. It's meant to replicate the size of a manga book in Japan, but that distinctive feel was perfect, a great fit for me. And so once we had created a repository of roughly 44 images, I was in a position now to play with it. And that's when it emerged as a YouTube series. So I wasn't publishing per se, but it was like a soft launch, a little pilot. Let's see how people receive it, kind of feedback I would get. And it had a moderate degree of traffic on YouTube. It was enough to share with my students and treat them as guinea pigs in 160. Anybody that was at last year's Symposium on Critical Thinking would have heard me or seen in my slide deck at that time that I had incorporated it into like a discussion board activity, but allowed them access to Arai Guma, because now in a digital form, it was universally accessible. And in those YouTube shorts, let's call them, I narrate the whole book, all 11 chapters. And so people would not necessarily have to read it. They would have to tolerate my voice. And I've been told some people just prefer reading it, Mark. So maybe go easy on the audiobook. You don't have to rush into doing an audiobook. But and again, some others really dig it, and the students did. And it gave rise to this lightning talk in which I met Catherine Rain, another writing circle member. And I reconnected with her. I knew Catherine from these collaborations with the English Tutoring Center. She's a wonderful person, great sense of humor, and she could really get under the skin in a good way of the characters. She had this mirthful, kind of whimsical, and really off the handle like sense of humor that I just loved. We connected, and there was like that synergy, which was essential, because in the next few slides, I kind of explain my book adheres to that 3-act kind of principle of development and how things come into being, how we arrive and cross the finish line. But once Catherine and I had connected, and there was serious talk now of making a clean copy, I took full advantage of these opportunities to drop into writing circle and information exchange. It was like, what are other people doing? How did they get their project off the ground? What's it like to actually publish something? It was new to me. I mean, when you do your thesis, it's outsourced to like ProQuest and they take care of everything. But I learned after, finishing the clean copy that Jeremy Lusick at Centennial College Press, there was a very sophisticated system. It wasn't terribly difficult to bring one's assets and then convert to the specific platform that's used by wholesalers and retailers. But it required a specialized set of skills for sure. And that's when Jeremy introduced to an alumna. Her name is Nikki Hoy, and she and I did the next, and it was fairly intensive, but the next phase was book design and then making it, formatting it to these 2 platforms, as it turned out, Ingram Lightning Spark and Kindle Direct Publishing, so that by the end of last year, my book was up for sale, and I was confident I could enable distribution. But I will share with you a caveat about that final step and what made for a couple of false starts before basically in December it was good to go, and it's been on sale ever since. As I mentioned, 3-act principle. So just to really give you like the executive summary, this collaboration with my illustrator was something that had to be consistent and regular. So the name of the game is to keep your eye on the ball and just chip away and not lose the momentum that you build in any way possible. My chief relationship at this time was to generate images on a weekly basis. And so I had this goal of producing a monochromatic color scene and 3 character poses, like what's on the screen here. And this would take roughly 1 week. We could turn around through our collaboration, which meant me initially scouting locations and pictures and sharing them with my illustrator to give him a sense of what I needed, where my characters would be, and then him in the middle of the week being able to generate A and B versions, rough drafts, from then to basically green light and go to the final image, which he would have ready basically at the end of the week. And we kept this up for approximately 11 or 12 weeks. And it was, it was prolific in the way that he could produce things digitally. And I was so pleased with how well I was able to communicate what I needed and allow him the space to also bring in his own unique spin or understanding of the characters and how best to represent their personalities. Because unlike some of the more popular niche or cult tales like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, these raccoons have no garments, no weapons, they're naked. And so we need these very subtle distinctions because people understandably might lose track of who's who, and you may also be frustrated as a reader in the first chapter, for example, when you learn everybody's name in that family that moved from the countryside. Everybody's name begins with an R, except for the father, who remains nameless. And on another chat, I could explain why he remains nameless. But Rachel, Ricky, Ray, Rose, these characters, Ralph, who's here, that's the boy, the youngest boy. They have very distinct features that do require, I think, a second look for the person who's anticipating some form of, let's call it aesthetic or layering or potential for bringing in other visual representations, which I didn't want. I wanted these raccoons to be as natural as possible, albeit they're all talking and they're all pretty much standing on their hind legs, which is unrealistic, and that's the fiction or the suspension of disbelief. But that was a deliberate choice on my part. It was not Hung's decision to leave them unadorned. So in the end, as I mentioned, 44 images that could be reproduced and reemerged actually as like a character chart or flow chart where relationships are established with little bubble or buttons of faces and characters and how they're aligned. A comic book panel was produced, something for a pitch deck that I used. This was a very versatile system that allowed me to represent these images and create slide decks like what you're seeing today for multiple purposes. I think that was part of the attraction, or maybe helped convince people in the audience of the symposium Critical Thinking last year that there was value, there were assets here, there was substance, perhaps, even though it's a very pulp fiction feel, comic book, graphic novel. It's not what you would call like an academic journal, but there were aspects to this that made it a little bit more dynamic. And Catherine understood that really well. So once my relationship with Hung ended, and he was contracted to work for me over several contracts, 11 contracts for those 11 weeks, let's say. I entered into individual contracts with Catherine to do X number of chapters each week and take that manuscript and make it a clean copy. And that was so much fun, but so tiring too. Anybody that's gone through the editing process knows this is really something that requires patience, and you rely on your partner to give constructive feedback, and you don't take things the wrong way. It's objective criticism. It's good for the story. I trusted Catherine 100%, and that allowed me to disagree with her politely, respectfully disagree, and then sometimes take things that I had negated and then realized, oh my God, you know what? That should stay. That should be inserted. That's missing. So Catherine was essential for helping flesh out dialogue, complete the descriptions of settings, find the holes in the plot where things were still in my head and I hadn't recognized that someone else might not understand or be able to make that leap. So we, through Google Docs, Zooms, and coffee dates, we were able to churn out another 11 chapters, clean copy, and I was just so pleased. And now I had something of, I think, a value, and it was in respectable shape that I could approach Centennial College Press or Jeremy. Jeremy and I sat down and talked about what the scope of work would be. How could I get it from just being in my MacBook to something that is viewed by the public? And so Jeremy had mentioned that David Stover, his boss at Centennial College Press, have a number of alumni that really are looking for work in their initial days once they graduate. And they thought these people have just graduated with the knowledge of all these platforms that could take what I had produced and then bundle it as a single entity, right? And so, this was a fantastic, I think, stroke of luck for me, being in a writer's circle room like you are now, listening to Jeremy talk about the differences of publishing or seeking representation from a publisher and an agent versus self-publishing, which is what ultimately I ended up doing. It was, you could say serendipitous, but you might just say, it's that convergence of preparation and luck. And so they felt there was not much heavy lifting in terms of, redoing Arai Guma. It was essentially intact. It would need, however, a person with those specific skill set to take it and post it on something called Ingram Lightning Spark. It's a really interesting platform. It's a B2B business model. Therefore, they are wholesaling and they are connected to multiple retail chains, big bookstores, primarily in the States, but they have international representation too. And they basically print for the retailers. They print on demand. And they expect the self-publisher, such as myself, to provide the metadata that then lights up those purchasing managers' feeds when we've applied like certain keywords. So long story short, and there's a caveat there too, the big retail chains, within 6 months of posting it or enabling it on the Ingram Lightning Spark, they would be able to see my book and potentially consider selling it en masse. That is yet to happen. I have not gotten rich off this. In fact, if you talk to my wife, she would say, no sequels, please. So, there is this implication of having to shell out initially. If you have the belief in yourself, you can keep the budget low. I tend to shoot a little bit higher, and I think I was rewarded. It wasn't just uploading onto Ingram Lightning Spark for the potential for a Barnes and Noble to pick it up. It was like, wow, I have like this right here, the community that I'm from in the East End of Toronto. Centennial College has two perfectly good vehicles with which to share the news. And I was just so happy and just felt so grateful. And really, it's that appreciation, I think, that we seek in the end. We would like people to recognize our work. And so by posting here in Writers Unblocked and then sells dialogues, I've created some continuity, or I've demonstrated the momentum is not behind the scenes. It's out there, it's building. And some people may not dig it because it's not everybody's cup of tea. But this continuity is really cool. And if I look back, even the first time I wrote an Arai Guma chapter, it was accepted by Calm Dialogues. That's another, well, it used to be the School of Advancement, but we've now been rebranded as School of English and Liberal Studies. And when the pandemic hit, all the special projects got shut down because budgets were tight. And so Calm Dialogues had my very first version of chapter 1. It wasn't even called chapter 1 or Arai Guma. It was simply Rangers in the Night. And I had featured a family of raccoons struggling in the city. It's really interesting how it reemerged and was taken up by Writers Unblocked. And I'm happy to say it's better, a lot better. It even comes with images and the link to the YouTube narration of chapter 1. So it's a lot more dynamic. I mean, you can't ever lose hope. You want to be mindful in this process of moving from one stage to the next, of having ways to keep your spirits up and not get discouraged and feel bloody lonely. Because as a self-publisher, everything's on you to keep it going and to keep producing. And in funny ways, I amused myself with like a Margaret Atwood masterclass. Or, I would be watching Cowboy Bebop on Netflix, not binge watching it, but recognizing one of Elwy Yost's boys. I think Graham Yost is the screenwriter. And I was, it made me examine the episodes that were, part of this, what is actually a Japanese anime, Cowboy Bebop. It got produced as a real life drama on Netflix, just one season. But, when I'd sit down and watch that, I was mindful of, this is another type of education. This is another type of self-learning. And it has an indirect benefit to me as an aspiring, novelist, let's say. Those types of quiet moments were very motivational, very meaningful. And it helped me keep my eye on the ball. Like I was saying, Arai Guma was near the finish line, but I needed that final stage. I needed the confidence that I had some kind of infrastructure behind it to push it across the finish line. And that's really what Nikki Hoy, who's, as I said, an alumna from the publishing program, Centennial, had done for me. I think that was a suggestion by someone in Jeremy Lusick's Writer Circle talk that led me to meet this student who I'd never taught. I mean, she had recently graduated, but she understood what I wanted to do. And that was because I think Jeremy had made the initial connection between the two of us. And then the part that I wanted to come back to with David Stover was that guy bailed me out when Amazon could not get a hold of the price on the digital listing for Arai Guma when we first launched it from Ingram Lightning Spark. As it turns out, they are competitors. And so the price was being set by the market, not the listed cover price. And because it was an obscure novel, an American small bookseller would take the chance and sell it for like twice the price. And this was on account of Ingram Lightning Spark not having a firm grip on how prices are determined through the Amazon platform. So David comes in and he says, Mark, I'll help you out on this. I'll make sure that we can move it to Kindle Direct Publishing, because I had no intention of doing that separately. I just felt everything was good to go from Ingram Lightning Spark as the source for all the retailers to pull from if they were interested in the book. But through Kindle Direct Publishing now, I've been able to lock down, the Kindle price of $9.99 versus the paperback, which is $19.95. Those are the Canadian pricings. And I've ensured that the international pricing is also stable. And so those little details, those things that can cause like unbelievable stress, because it took me 10 days to sort that out. That was like trying to get on the phone, get through to Amazon, talk to somebody who knows what's going on. Can they apply the fix or can't they? What do I do next? It was really like back and forth and in limbo. But finally, I could say to my friends and family, because my family weren't going to pay $50.49 for this book, as much as they love me. I understood. It was like, no, 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 Mark, you got to do something about this. Do you realize what's happening? Ah, and so we're coming to the close of my slide deck, and this one is the character relationships board that we had created as a result of that repository of images that I had to play with, and I would occasionally ask Hung for a favor. And I said, I'd love to have something like this for my book. I think this is really important, given there may be some people confused. Who's who here? And so I like this image because it's kind of where my mind is at right now, too. I don't have, let's say, a place, a locale. I don't have an official book launch yet. I've had a soft launch, which is letting people know, here's the link. And if you'd like to try it out, let me know what you think. It's not been an official book signing moment yet. I would love to do that. I'm looking for suggestions. Does anybody know a good bookseller? I've been to a few retailers, but they don't have capacity because it's not something that's done by the little guys. It may be something done by the indigos of this in this Canadian market, but I'm not a well-known established writer. Probably considered just a one-off. And that, if you were wondering, is the reason publishers wouldn't take me on. I think the general industry rule is 3. You have to be bankable for 3 novels, and I've just got 1. So it doesn't look good in terms of metrics to them. And I'd also like to point out that in the industry, the book publishing world, one of the reasons that price discrepancy happened in Amazon, as I just mentioned, it was like $50.49 at one retailer. Philly Joe Books, 21 in the States. It's like, who is Philly Joe? It was comical, but at the same time, it was very frustrating and upsetting. But the reason was I declined to click a return policy with Ingram Lightning Spark. And so in the wholesaling business, retailers will not buy your book if they don't have a guarantee that you will pay them back for any inventory that's left behind. In other words, they don't want to be saddled with the cost of not being able to move books. So that was going to, represent a big financial hit if they were unable to sell it. Supposing they bought 1,000 units, 600 of them didn't sell, I'd be on the hook for the 600, not only because I had to pay for the printing charge to generate 1,000, but now I would have to pay them back plus shipping if I wanted to preserve them. Otherwise, I'd just pay them back for not being able to move the product and let them destroy it. And they bought it at 40% of the cover price, right? This is the nature of the beast. And the thing that really, maybe it was the hair that broke the camel's back, or maybe that's not the right analogy, but the idea that we would generate so much energy just to like go down the drain, just to end up in landfill or hopefully get recycled. I mean, that was very upsetting for my ecological identity or environmental consciousness, what have you. I was not willing to click the return policy. So it's unlikely Barnes and Noble would buy X number of books to put on their shelves. I'll remain obscure or maybe a cult classic at best, very niche. But I'm happy to say I can live with that I just do not want to cause all that unnecessary movement of resources for it to amount to nothing and become like an externality, something that would really go against the grain for my my sense of, making the planet a better place for our kids. And voila, there it is. The proof's in the pudding. If you were to click on that, or just Google me, you will see that it's available for sale. And that was a wonderful moment. I'm sitting back down in front of my Art Kane poster. It's one of my sacred places, my man cave, actually. But this is the video that I shared with people to say I had done it. I could really hold on to something, and it was just such a moment, as you probably have experienced if you've self-published or had something in print. It's a great feeling, and so I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. I am so happy to take questions and to let others know, hang in there. It is so worth it. It is such a ride. It is just so engaging. And I think if you can share with people your particular bent and not have people run the other way, I mean, wow, talk about adding up the wins in that column there. It's just, I feel very, very fortunate. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. That was outstanding. Bruce, I see you have your hand up, or is that a question, or you just saying thank
Yeah,
you?
it won't take up too much time, but thanks, Mark. I'm going to be buying that book for this weekend with the snow flying, because I got to find out if Chester's a friend or a foe of the raccoon. Like the drawing of the dog was so inspiring, because that's a dream to do, like a comic book of dogs, having dogs that I've had over the years and that. So it truly is. And the other thing I just wanted to mention, when you were talking about book signings and that, I know when you were talking about the Indigos, having worked for the Indigo chain past and in another career, I remember doing a stint at Kohl's bookstore in the beach, and it was always a little bit different. So I don't know if that might be something to explore in the future. And I have heard wind from my friends that still work there that I think Jerry Schwartz is, maybe him and his wife Heather, they're thinking about maybe buying back Indigo and separating it from the corporation of chapters. So after the big losses, so hopefully, fingers crossed for maybe something materializing.
Thank you for that tip. I know that Kohl's bookstore in the beach at Queen and Lee next to the library.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we used to do book signings for independents that would just come in with their box of books. And somehow it happened, I'm not quite sure, but with head office, they seem to give some sort of an okay for that in the past. So
I'm used to accosting people on the street, so maybe I've got to make my way down there. Thank you for the tip.
Okay, and I'll see, I'll be going down there. I'll try and make a connection. I can always try and get back to you too if you like. But that was great. Thanks. Well, how long did this take you, if you don't mind me just asking, before taking up too much time here?
Yes, you mean from start to finish? It looks like about 3 years. Yeah, to do everything that I had done. That includes my images, narrating the book on YouTube, bringing it to the Ingram Lightning Source platform and the Kindle Direct Publishing, so that it's available for sale online. Approximately 3 years. But you could say, as many of us who are got big imaginations, these things are somewhere in the subconscious. They're lingering, and they're there for a number of years. I think I was frustrated in 2018 that I didn't have something more meaningful to offer. I was doing some rain gardening. I don't know if anybody remembers the days in which my knee is terrible now, but I've hung up my boots for the moment. And I used to do some landscaping, and rain gardening is natural landscaping. And so we had a good run there. I mean, the David Suzuki Foundation really liked our MO. And so I was doing some community work there, and it was kind of emerging that people were a little bit distraught, and frankly, the research wasn't good either. What I learned was that our trajectory is quite bad. And so the thought was, how do you keep kids from getting demoralized? And how do you, the messaging is terrible from the scientists' point of view. And it's not wrong. It's just that the accumulation of all that negative information, it's like, wow, we've got to find a way to communicate better and to help people understand there's urgency to living a little more sustainably. And it doesn't mean like you have to sacrifice a great deal. And so I think I was looking for a vehicle for a number of years prior to like that 3-year project where, okay, now I'm going to get to work.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your question, Bruce. Margot, I think you had your hand up.
I love it. And I love what you say about the environment. I have 4 grandkids, and we speak about this often, and it's how to actually present the message so that there's an invitation rather than look at the crap, you know. There are 2 questions that came to me, Mark. So I did the publishing course. I graduated from an 85, so publishing has changed exponentially. That is not what I teach at this point at our college, but when you mentioned that you have to buy them back, don't they do remainders any longer where they keep it and then sell them for a lower price? If I'm hearing, yeah, it doesn't sound that way, huh?
No, and it's terrible. They would
yeah.
send me the torn cover of the paperback to my house to demonstrate that they had
But they actually, wow, because back in the day, well, again, in the bookstores, I mean, I worked for Deno Publishing, where now Honest Eds used to be, but we always, there were many bookstores down there in the annex where you could buy remainders, you know, or where you could even take them home. Working at the bookshops, I was at all of them for a long time working at them. Thank you for that. And then my other question is this. Have you taken, it's kind of similar to what Bruce perhaps was speaking about, but have you lifted your books, if you have them, you know, in the hard copy, to independent bookshops? Because I know I am back in Peterborough, it's closed now, but Titles, there were a couple of bookshops, and I have done this, I have self-published for 100 years now, but I take them into independent shops, and they usually sell them. Have you done that or considered? Is that the possibility for you?
Yes, it would be like I pay to print them from Ingram as well, and then yeah, I control, I guess, the price, but I don't know how it works in terms of, is it consignment, and then, but I would love to have that introduction where I go down to Coles, for example, in the beaches.
Yeah.
My home, and I'm an East Ender. I grew up in Scarborough Southwest, and so that just sounds like a great idea.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea, and I'm going to tell you, there's usually a lot of interest if you're from the area. So again, I lived in Peterborough a million years ago. I've just been back after 20 years, and there were 3 independent bookshops, and they all took my books. I mean, and trust me, it's poetry, so people aren't dropping down dead for poetry. But I also did it in Toronto. I just moved from Roncy, from that area. And my most current book, they took it for a while. So, you know, it gets the name out there. And what you are actually selling is pretty goddamn important. And the audience is there. And how you're articulating it, Mark. Hello, Rock the Casbah. I'm here for my grandkids. I saw it and I'm like, Granny Margot is in. It's just gorgeous. Thank you very much.
Well, that was really great.
So, Mark, I just want to very quickly, I know we are over our time here. Congratulations. I know we've spoken before about this. I just want to reiterate this. Congratulations is no small feat to publish a book, and a book such as yours. I've seen it. I've read a little bit about it, and I'm looking like Bruce. I'm looking to get a copy. I just have a quick question, and that is, what informed the choice of animal in this story, in this case, raccoon?
It's so funny. I felt like my sense of humor is the antidote to all of the, oh my God, the sky is falling. Did anyone remember the videos that started circulating? Like, there were viral videos of raccoons starting to open the green bins that I think it was John Tory, but he was standing at a press conference. I remember they were introducing these brand new raccoon-proof green bins, and they were so proud, and they were demonstrating how this is impossible to open. Those raccoons will never get in there. And then people were like taking videos of raccoons opening the green bins, and it struck me as being so funny, and that's brilliant. Of course they would. They're this dexterity of their hands is unbelievable, and they're all over my neighborhood. I'm here just north of the Danforth in Coxwell, and there's families of raccoons trapezing across my fence line. They're adorable when you see them walk as a family, like mama and next in line and babies. And oh my God, they are just the funniest creatures. It's not that I'm encouraging them to come to my house. It's just I live with them. I coexist with these animals, and everyone seems to have a story about Toronto's trash panda. There's all these names and tons of pop culture and references and symbols out there. Like Camp TO has a raccoon as the mascot. You saw like a really grouchy raccoon on a Good Food TV commercial recently. I think it's Richard the raccoon. And he's upset that he's not getting any scraps because the good food is so good. The humans aren't leaving him any leftovers, right? There have been countless numbers of, I guess, jabs at the raccoon. I just felt, wow, this would be so much fun. And they have an allure to them. They are really an interesting animal. When you delve, you'll see stuff by like David Suzuki's Nature Things, right? You probably saw Raccoon Nation, maybe. Or I think Richard Attenborough had something on Earth too about how they've adapted. Like they're incredibly resilient animals. So it strikes me as being an intelligence that kind of goes under the radar, or people classify them as a nuisance mostly. And I thought, what better way to use them as a vehicle to embed like a little bit of an environmental message there, where we might even poke a little bit fun at ourselves, right? And the amount of garbage that they're fighting over. I mean, who can be king of the hill? And the hill is garbage.
Mark, I'm very sure that you're being celebrated in the raccoon kingdom for raising their profile in this way. So thank you so much. This is very insightful and very encouraging as well. And thank you so much for this.
Well, Mark, this has been absolutely fabulous. A great topic with raccoons. That everybody has a story or can relate to a story about raccoons. And that's what's going to be the selling feature for your book when you get it out into the different venues that you hopefully will get it into. So once again, we thank you very much. I think I can speak for everyone to say that I thoroughly enjoyed this presentation. It was very engaging. It was very passionate. You did an amazing job. We want to wish you all the success with the book, and everyone make an effort to go buy Marc's book.
Thank you.
On Amazon, right? So
drop me a line. Send me an email too. It does,
promote it for them as much as we can.
Happy to stay in contact too.
Thank you very much, Marc. And once again, thank you all for attending. But before we leave, quickly, I'll pass it over to Sonia just as a few parting words about our next publication.
Marc, that was really energizing. I'm just going to pop into the chat what we just shared. Maybe some of you probably missed it. I'm not sure. So this is part of the Writing Circle group. We've been publishing for 2 years now. And so if you wish to submit any form of literary work, we've had Marc's, sort of feature as an audio video sort of dynamic contribution last time around. We can do audio books. So any kind of submissions are welcome. So the first link will take you to the writer's Centennial Rights website, and you can see the previous works there. And the second one is actually a writer's series podcast that we did last year as well. So there's quite a bit going on with the Writing Circle. Gosha has been amazing organizing these things for us once a month, and she's our contact and fellow colleague from the Centennial Libraries. So look out for her email and, broadcast about when the next one is going to take place. I believe it will be the last week of April. So typically we meet on Friday afternoons, and it'd be wonderful for you to join in and celebrate what we do best, what we enjoy, really. So again, thank you so much, Marc. We're going to send you a copy of the recording, Marc. There's a lot of action that went on in the chat. We don't want you to miss that. You can soak it all in later at these.
So once again, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you, Marc, for the great presentation. we look forward to hopefully seeing all of you again with our April. We have another speaker in April. Surprise. So, we'll send you the information later on in April, but we look forward to engaging another speaker as well. And thank you again for attending. I know it's 1 o'clock or 1:01, so people have to go. So thank you, and we'll see you soon.